or add to it, customize it for your region. It's definitely not a complete document. We always thought of it as a living document that we would keep adding to as we had new ideas. And I'd also just want to start by saying that I don't claim to be a debt management expert at all. And I don't think anyone in our team would either. It really is just a group of ideas that practices have had, really, so just to help them when they're starting to think about their processes. And when we did talk to practices about debt, we sort of acknowledged that it's a sensitive topic and that it's really difficult for the practice and the patients. So for the practice, they're carrying that sort of financial burden, the impact that could have on their business. And then for the patients, just thinking about that access barrier when they're trying to access the practice. So really tricky balance for them to get right, and acknowledging that a health setting is a bit different to debt management and other services. So the toolkit kind of, when we started working on it, it split into two parts. One was the debt prevention side of things, and then the second part was around the management of debt once it had occurred. We started off putting in some things about policy. So we found that the practices that were doing really well with debt management had a good policy in place, and they had their processes were all written up so that the whole team was on the same page. And that really seemed to empower the admin team because they knew what the process was. They knew that they were going to be supported in whatever decision they made, and if it had to be escalated, that they would be backed up. And they also really liked that they had some tools and resources to help patients with. So they weren't just talking to them about having to make the payment, they were giving them some options. So with the policy section, we just put in about what sort of things you might want to include in there. So the practice's expectation for payment, just outlining what that is, including the process for when someone can't pay, the process for managing debt when it has occurred, having some levels or steps of tolerance. So whether that's a dollar amount or an amount of consultations or a period of time. And then there was the idea of having a debt champion. So some people are really good at having these conversations with patients. It is a special skill. So if you have someone that's like that, consider using them as your debt champion. And then always obviously having that consideration for clinical risk, especially if you're starting to put restrictions in place that's going to prevent access. So with the debt prevention part, we had some training ideas for the practice. So this was really about empowering the whole team so that everyone is on the same page, everyone understands your process, and that really anyone could have the conversation or start the conversation if it came up with a patient, and then direct them to the right person in the admin team to have that further conversation. So some of the training ideas that came up were a session around funding streams and claiming. So in our team, we actually go out to the practices and talk about that with them, like a lunch session, whether it's with new staff or with their whole team, just to get everyone on the same page. Pegasus also offers some de-escalation training and motivating conversation training at practices. So that's just around helping with those conversations and if they've got aggressive patients to help manage that. Some privacy training, so just that awareness of that this is a sensitive topic, and making sure your admin team is aware of what they're saying to patients, how they're asking them questions, and who can hear in the waiting room, and maybe some alternatives for having that conversation either on the phone or in a side room. And then we have the MSD support team. So they also were available to go into practices and offer some training. So just talking about what they can offer for patients, what the different types of benefits are that practices can make sure their patients are on, and how the MSD team can support the practice. We gathered some early prevention ideas, so just ways to kind of help early on. So making sure you've got good payment options for patients around, you've got FPOS and online banking, automatic payments, those kind of things. Making sure that patients know that you've got all those, and including them like on the bottom of your invoices and in your reminder texts out to patients. The automatic payments, a lot of practices have that, just that kind of drip feed for patients. So it's a weekly amount rather than big bulk amounts when they're coming in. And that might be to clear debt or to get them in credit for future. The enrolment process, so making sure it's part of the enrolment process that you talk about your payment expectations, so it's sort of nice and clear up front. And at that point, you might be able to think about whether an automatic payment's the right thing for that person as well. Utilising the funding stream, so we talked about knowing about them, but actually making sure that the practice is using them, and maybe having someone that's monitoring how much is left in each of those funding streams. And the visible fee schedule, so in your waiting room and websites, obviously, and making sure that your reception team are aware when they're booking patients, that they're letting the patients know if there might be an additional charge or a double appointment or minor procedures, just so really front-footing that conversation rather than a surprise at the front desk. And then this kind of idea of the early identification. So that was around having a process in place where you might identify patients that need some support. So you're doing it nice and early rather than waiting till they've got $100 debt and then having that conversation. And so thinking about ways that that might be identified in the consult room. They might kind of reveal to the clinician that their partner's been made redundant or something like that, so that you can share that back with the admin team, and they can be talking about putting in some automatic payments, or that they might be now eligible for community services card, or that you could use SIA. And then we had some support options. So in Canterbury, we have PCWs, or partnership care workers, and their role is around reducing access barriers, so they can work with patients and help them navigate MSD, and maybe link them up with some other support services like food banks or housing support. And then hips and health coaches are in a lot of practices now, so same sort of support, navigating MSD, helping them fill out forms, linking them up with lots of resources and support. The budgeting resources were, so MSD's website has lots of information about managing money, and it also has a section on the budgeting services that are available in your area. So it was just good for the admin team, maybe your debt champion, and your hips and health coaches to have that information so that they can share it with patients. Having your CSC applications forms available at the desk, and the team knowing what the eligibility criteria is and the threshold, so that you can share that with patients. The disability allowance, so obviously having patients on it that are eligible, but also thinking about getting a review done if their health-related costs have changed, so they can review and make the payment higher for the patient if their costs have increased. The redirection of benefit payments, so this one is the redirection of some of their benefit going straight to the practice to help with their costs, and that may be for clearing debt as well. There has to be good cause for doing that. Health is considered a priority need by MSD, so it does fit the criteria, but the patient needs to consent, and they need to fill in a form, which MSD are able to help with as well. And then also some MSD support. So when they're going out to the practices, they're obviously talking about all the things they can support with, but some extra things that they mentioned were around the MSD app. So reminding patients that that information's there, which tells them when their next payments are and how much they're getting, as well as things like when their medical certificate will expire. And a tip with the medical certificate that they gave us was that if you've got patients coming in and their medical certificate is going to expire in the next few days, which would affect their payment, then you can contact MSD, and they can change that date to the next time you've got an available appointment. So you explain the situation to them and they can alter the date, which means a patient continues to get their payment, and the practice doesn't need to use their acute slots for medical certificates. And the last tip that they had was around an appointment of an agent. So if a patient's talking about how their relationship's broken down with MSD, or that they're really struggling navigating the system, they can appoint an agent or a trusted person that can work on their behalf to help them get things sorted. So onto the second part of the toolkit, which was around the debt management. So once the debt has occurred, how the practice is managing that. This is the bit that really needs the good processes around it, and nice and clear. And we kind of found that this split into two parts. So the first part being those early stages of debt with the reminders that were being sent out, and then the second part being the escalation of the ongoing debt or the large amounts of debt. So with the debt reminders, it was just around defining the process, making sure it's nice and clear, including things like what method you're going to use to remind them and the frequency of contact. So whether that's going to be text, emails, phone calls, weekly, fortnightly, monthly, and what the message will be at each of those times. So just having some maybe templates that you can use so that it's getting nice, clear, consistent messages out to the patients. Including in your process those levels of escalation so that everyone knows what when they need to flag it, and making sure it's completed nice and regularly. So again, that sort of consistency of message, consistent time, and maybe thinking about the same person doing it all the time and setting some time aside for them to do that. With the person that's assigned to do it, this was sort of flagged in practices that this part doesn't need to be done by the practice manager. So it's one of those jobs that can be supported by the admin team, and then when the escalation is needed, then it goes to the practice manager. So then when it is escalated, obviously, like we've said, it goes usually to the practice manager or to your debt champion. The patient's already had all their reminders now, so now you're moving into that stage of having a discussion with the patient to really determine what their situation is and try and find a solution or a plan going forward. So revisiting all of those prevention tools and supports, now that they're having a conversation with the practice manager, maybe an automatic payment does seem more appealing. And then looking to implement some rules or boundaries and restrictions around the patient as well. So we included some ideas in there that we picked up. The first one's around having a payment plan before the patient's able to book their next appointment. So it's not asking them to pay off their debt, but it is stopping them to adding to the account. The next one's similar. So they're asking for full payment before they book the appointment, so before so they're not going to continue adding to the debt. And then the third one is around those patients who leave before they've paid, and so they're continuing to add to that account. So they ask them to pay when they arrive at the front desk. There's obviously a heap more options that you can have there, and all of that has to be at the discretion of the practice, what they feel comfortable with for their patients. And this whole section really has to be at the discretion of the person making those phone calls, because every patient situation is going to be different, so every solution really needs to be different. But this is also the section that you really need to be considering that clinical risk and the health implications. So if you're putting something in place that's going to prevent them booking an appointment, then making sure there's a plan for perhaps a triage when they do try and book an appointment to make sure that they're not acutely unwell before you turn them away. And then also with the escalation, just thinking about your large outstanding debts. So some other options you've got would be talking to MSD. So they sometimes do a one-off payment that can help patients to get out of debt, and they can also help you with those redirections of payments as well. The special circumstances one is really just understanding where your business owners sit with this, what their stance is, when they would want to know if something's impacting the patient. So sort of those families that are in a difficult situation, they've got debt at the practice, it's causing distress, blocking access, and starting to impact on their health. So what kind of things would the GPs want to do in that circumstance? So we have an example of a family that had a large debt with the practice. They were paying it off. But then the GP started to realise that the elderly couple that were attached to that family were going to ED, and they were getting admitted to hospital because they were embarrassed to come to the practice, but they didn't want to keep adding to the debt that the family were paying off. So the GPs were able to, they made a decision that they'd pay the debt off for the patient, and as long as that payment kept going forward. So you can't do that for every family, and not all practices have the ability to do that, but just sort of understanding what that might look like for your practice, whether that's writing it off, using some of the SIA funding to clear some debt for patients, or doing a dollar for dollar, that every $20 they pay, the practice will write off $20 to help them clear that faster. And then finally, debt collection. So when we started to look into this, it really did seem like a last resort. By the time you cover the fees and the charges and the time that it takes to go through the process, there didn't seem like a lot of benefit to the practice. But obviously, in some situations, you do need to do that, but just making sure that that's included in your policy. So what company you use, what you need to do, how much time you give the patient, how much notice, and just so that they're aware of the impacts that that's going to have on them. And then lastly, last slide, just some extra things to think about for the policy, just around writing off old debt. So we had some practices when they started to look at it, hadn't been looked at for a long time, so there was some really old debt sitting there on the age balance summary. So just whether it's worth keeping it there or you want to write it off. And the same with the small debt. So if you've got a patient who owes $20, they've transferred out, you've got no contact details, is it worth keeping them on the age balance summary, or do you write it off and put an alert on their file? Just means that your age balance summary then is really an accurate reflection of what you're trying to recover, what debt you're actually able to recover. So that's really a conversation with your business owners and probably your accountant around how to manage those ones. And then that leads on to the ones that do have an outstanding debt and then are wanting to re-enroll with you, what your process is around that, getting an automatic payment in place if you are enrolling them. And then debt reporting. So if it's a focus in your practice, it might be reporting back to the business owners monthly or quarterly, just to let them know how that's going. And you may also want to report at staff meetings if it is a big focus. It doesn't have to be the dollar amount, could just be that it's trending up or trending down, or that you've decreased by $500 this month. And it also gives your staff an opportunity to kind of jump in with any problems that they're having around debt management at the front desk or things that aren't working well. And huddles was something that came up as well, just that opportunity to, if you had someone that's coming in with a debt, just as a team have a bit of a plan in place, so that making sure the practice manager would be on site and that the GP knew that that conversation was going to take place. So that's our toolkit. That's there's nothing revolutionary in there. There's no silver bullets on how to manage debt. But we found that it was a great way to just pull all those ideas together and share them across the practices, because they seem to be really keen on hearing what others are doing and what's working in other practices. And it was also great to be able to offer something to everyone, no matter what level they were at, whether they were starting their journey in debt management or they already had good processes in place and they just pulled out bits that were useful for them. So like I said, we'll share it with everyone. Really happy to hear feedback. And yeah, because we want to keep adding to it. But yeah, any questions?
Or even anybody that wanted to share maybe something that they know their practices or our practice is actually doing. I do have one, a practice down in Dunedin that I was working with. They went out to quite a few of the community organisations, like sort of local churches and sort of organisations like that, and just asked if they wanted to, you know, sort of help some of the families that they know, you know, that needed the help. Yeah, and I think this is, you know, when you talk about using discretion, because, you know, you can have some patients that you're like, yep, no, they definitely need like that assistance. And then you have the other ones that just, you know, racking up the debt. They're like, we can't pay. And then, you know, they buy a new car. And so yeah, it was quite a discussion, because that's why I was quite keen to hear about this, because the feedback when I was in PHO was that it was really, you know, such a struggle, and just hearing those other things that people are doing is just so useful. Kind of like sparks your own thoughts of what you can do in your practice or how to help your patients and practices in your PHO. But yeah, did anybody else have anything they wanted to ask or add? Or Jo, what have you got there?
Kia ora. I'm from Whanganui Regional Health Network. I just have a question around the utilisation of the SIA funding for some of that. Can you, because I think that's actually quite an interesting idea, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that you'd want to be encouraging a whole heap, like clearing debt, but for some patients, like if you think about the use of SIA, I mean, SIA is for access. So if their debt is preventing them accessing care, then I think you could really justify using it. I wouldn't want to be encouraging practices to pay every debt off with it, but and they wouldn't be able to because there's not enough, but there's some circumstances.
So kind of how do you get around it? Sorry, that sounds a terrible word. How do you so to get the PHO on board to kind of endorse that, how does that work? I mean, I am the part of the PHO, but I think it is a really interesting thing because we definitely have those patients out there that,
Yeah, it's not something that we've kind of come up against, that the PHO hasn't kind of questioned it, because, it is, I think it's more around how often you're using it and making sure that they really are the right circumstances that you're doing that. But the practices are just claiming it through our portal and putting that down, that's what it's for. And so it's transparent. They're not.
Cool. No, awesome. Thank you.
So just following on from that, would the PHO be like, oh, hey, as a practice, you could potentially claim it like this? Or was the practice like, can we claim like this?
It's not really something we've gone out and advertised as a big thing to do. It's more just if practices have asked us or that kind of thing's come up, it's something that we've been able to share as an idea.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic.
And I think practices are really good at managing it as well because they know they can't use it all. There's not enough. Technically, they should be using it up front rather than waiting till the patient's in the debt, doing it at the start. But
hi, Ellie here from Gore. Just an idea I heard from a practice just last week too, one of our healthcare home practices, and they it's kind of around debt prevention rather than debt management, but every year they hold a double denim day. So it's a fundraiser day that all the staff wear double denim and you make a donation of whatever they want, and it's grown over about the 3 years that they've done it to they're getting quite a much larger sum now, from a few $100s the first year up to sort of a couple of thousand. From other donations as well, and the practice can use that for anything in the practice where there's a stated need, and almost no questions asked if it's there. So it might be to pay for someone's visit, or it might be to pay for the taxi to bring them to the practice or something, or other sort of social or housing needs or things like that. So so there's other ways that it's kind of a sad, I guess, that our health system isn't providing for that we have to rely on donations and socially active people to come up with these ideas. But there's just one idea that this could be useful in your kete for debt prevention as well.
Kind of links into what you were saying before. I think it was Patria about the community organisations going out to them, and so kind of thinking of those different donations you could use.
I love that it's double denim. Amazing. Lovey?
Well, kia ora. Thank you, Donna, for an amazing presentation.
Lovey's my team leader.
Not biased.
I just wanted to make a couple of particular points. And so debt management is the source of one of the major complaints that we get in general practice. The major, so it's she spoke to me like that. She called me out. Other people heard how embarrassing, how shameful. So all of that stuff, right? So we all know this. And so there's that component. The other thing that we know about businesses, like private businesses, we're not talking about probably our providers that are VLCA, because, they kind of only ever break even, but it is a source of income. So again, it's kind of balancing that all out. So this is maybe, I don't know, $10,000 a week, so potentially $400,000 in income. So, you know, like they've got to make sure that the money comes in. And so I wanted to make those 2 points because there are practices that don't charge fees. And so that takes away that source of complaint, right? So you don't have people calling them out because they have a debt, because they don't actually have a debt. So, you know, like that in itself for patients and the practice actually is, you know, like it's real more, it's mana enhancing in terms of that experience going to the practice and knowing that they're not going to be called out, knowing that they're, you know, potentially not going to have to go to the ED because they feel shamed because, you know, the lady at the front desk will call them out. So, I mean, I'm not saying that that, you know, all practices should be free, because I don't think that's always the answer. I think the model of how practices are funded needs to be looked at, and we think that maybe SIA and enhanced or, you know, like Care Plus or whatever funding model that we have is adequate. And obviously, I don't know that it always is. And so just those couple of points, you know, a source of complaints, but a source of income, and that, you know, where there's a better model around you know, funding general practice. So thank you very much, and I'll hand over to Renee. Kia ora, Renee.
Oh, kia ora, everyone. I'm Renee from the Whanganui Regional Health Network. That's amazing. Amazing presentation, Donna. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou and kia koe. I definitely want to support Jo in her kaupapa around the SIA and Care Plus for our whānau here in Whanganui. It seems like it's going to be a definite need moving forward. So thank you for just mentioning it and reaffirming what we kind of knew, but we just wanted to take it a little bit further moving on. And also, Alice, I love the double Ds, the double D funding. I just think that's such an amazing kaupapa to really look forward to, and maybe we might put that into our own services here in Whanganui. And also, I get a lot of feedback from our whānau, and that's from the whānau voice, and it's how, from a clinical point of view, how we approach the patient about the bill is starting to be a big moment for everybody here, because they get all whakamā, they don't turn back up because they don't want to, and then they start using our ED services again. So that was another thing that I just wanted to put my kōrero across, because Donna, what you're saying really resonated with me. Ngā mihi nui. Kia koutou.
Thank you.
Amazing. It's been really great kōrero. It's fantastic. Thank you, Donna. It's been great having you on here. Well, I think if that's sort of the questions we have for now, shall we move straight into and Donna, we're going to share those slides, but were you happy for people to contact you if they sort of had like a particular question or?
Yep, that's fine. I'll share the slides.
Amazing.
And I'll share the actual toolkit as well, so you can have a look at it.
Oh, that would be super useful. Thank you so much. Excellent. And let's move on. I'll pass over to Jontel now.
Kia ora koutou, ko Jontel Kiwi Kiwi tuku ingoa, ko Ngāti Wai, Ngāti Hine me Waikato Tainui o ko iwi, no Tamaki Makaurua hau, engari ko Paihia tuku kāinga I Nainei. So kia ora koutou, I'm Jontel. I hail from Tai Tokerau in the far north, which is where I live now, and also Waikato Tainui, and also Germany, England, Scotland, Ireland and France. So all the rugby teams basically, except for South Africa. So thank you so much for having me on today. I'm going to share I forgot to introduce myself to those of you who don't know me. I'm the change lead for collective action with communities with Collaborative Aotearoa. Luckily, I have met many of you who are amazing humans, and so enjoying being in this kaupapa with all of you today. So today I'm going to share some learning from training that I've done this year. It started in June and just ended in September, and it was two-day sessions, kanohi ki te kanohi in Hastings, and the rest were every second week, 2 hours online to follow up with the learning and work on a project on systems thinking, systems change, and mātauranga. But before we launch into that, I thought I'd take a couple of minutes to do a little 2-minute tinana check-in. Can't see that very well with my crazy background, my beautiful background, sorry. I just mean crazy because it blocks everything out. So I'm going to guide you all through a relaxation process called a body scan, which many of you will probably be very familiar with already. So what I get you to do, if you're comfortable, just close your eyes, or otherwise just stare down at the table in front of you. Place both feet firmly on the ground. And then with your hands, you can feel free to either sit them in your lap or put one on your heart, one on your puku. And gently listen to your breath as it moves in and out of your body. Hakiroto, breathe in. Hakiwato, breathe out. Hakiroto. Hakiwaho. Hakiroto. Hakiwaho. And just check in with your body with each breath. Do you notice any sensations? Maybe some tingling, some itching, tightness, maybe some aches. Just notice what your tinana has to tell you when you sit in silence. And with each breath in, send healing energy to any place in your tinana that asks for it. And with each breath out, send out that love from your body into the rest of the room. Notice if your body has any other messages for you today. Is there any particular kai it would like to have today? Is it asking for a walk at lunchtime? Is it asking for a stretch or a yawn? Or maybe there are things it's wanting to say to other people. And now we'll take some big breaths in and out. Hakiroto. Hakiwaho. Hakiroto. Hakiwaho. And now the biggest breath of the day. Hakiroto. Pākiwaho. And when you're ready, you can place your hands over your eyes. Gently open them. And welcome yourself back into the world. Give your hands a good rub. Get that mauri flowing. Mauri ora. All right, thank you everyone for having a bit of a chill session. So what I'll do is I'll start sharing my slides, and I always introduce this because there's a little bit of trepidation, but I tested it with Patria this morning and it was working, so let's go. Open.
You probably jinxed it now.
No, don't say that. Cool. It's working. Yay. All good? Okay. Oh, sorry, team. Just figuring out the speaker coach, just the right view. Presenter view. Is it all full screen? Do you see full screen? Okay, kapai, cool. Okay. So this learning captured my imagination instantly. It was Sarah Duncan, my manager at Tuora Campus Health and the Pati Community Health Network who sent this my way. She's like, hey, what do you think of this? And I was like, what I think is, can you please pay for me to go? So that was really awesome. Also, Collaborative has supported me to attend this as well. So it's been a real collaborative effort. So ngā mihi kia koutou to everyone who's done that. It's been awesome. Now, I just want to head this up with mātauranga is in the title of the learning, and I was really interested in how the mātauranga works with systems thinking and systems change. And to be totally visible, I'm still not sure with the learning that we got how it works, and it's a work in progress for me. And I have a lot of questions that have been raised from this training. So as I work through this, just to let you know, I don't have it all ironed out, but I'm very happy for whakaaro and thoughts along the way, and also for questions afterwards. So I really love this kōrero, in pursuit of mātauranga, or that wisdom and knowledge. Mā te kōrero ka mōhio, mā te mōhio ka marama, mā te marama ka mātou, mā te mātou ka ora. Through discussion comes awareness. Through awareness comes understanding. Through understanding comes knowledge. Through knowledge comes well-being. And what I love about this is that for me, it's like in Te Ao Māori, everything starts in te kore, in the darkness and the void. And it's the bringing together of all of the small elements, and then those elements start attracting more and more and more, and then you get growth and creation. And it's through that process of on this planet, us sharing, that we start compounding those elements of knowledge, of understanding. But it's not until we truly embody and experience and live it that we really fully know through our whole body and our whole being what something means. And that is, to me, the pursuit of mātauranga. So that's one of the kōrero that we had in this wānanga, and I really love this. That resonates with me. So just hold on to this idea as we move through our kōrero with systems thinking and systems change, because I love to see how and if that comes together for everyone else at the end too. So this is one of our systems thinking gurus, Donna Meadows, and she says the fundamental concepts of a systems approach are connectedness, relationships, and community, concepts which are the essence of spiritual awareness. I also really love that too, because it does fit in with with a lot of different cultures, in that a system is a spiritual entity because it brings together everything. So I thought it was pretty cool that an academic came up with something like that. And I don't mean that academics are not spiritual, but I just thought it was cool that it was posited like that. Pretty awesome. So first of all, have a look at what a system is. It's an interconnected set of elements that is coherently organized in a way that achieves something. So the elements, you've got those coming together, then you've also got the purpose of the system, and then you've got the connections within the system. And quite often we see in our systems in society that we've got the elements there and we've got the purpose there, but not necessarily all the connections. And as you can see from my very professional Venn diagram there, the connections are an equal measure of importance. And so that's something that I feel is a space that we can all be enhancing if we're going to get everything else to work together better towards its purpose. So a system creates its own patterns of behavior, and those patterns are also really important, because if something is continuing to produce the same types of patterns, and we want to make change within that, then obviously we're going to need to move around some of those elements, connections, or look at the purpose. Another interesting takeaway from this is that people attribute meaning to the elements, connections, and functions. And something that's really critical is that people's meanings to things, the meaning that they attach to things, is not always shared. So this is really interesting when it comes to where we are in the health sector at the moment, and what do we attach meaning to, what is it that we're open to changing, and how can we make sure that we're meeting all of these for our whānau. So I just wanted to give a couple of examples around the difference between common explanations and systems thinking explanations. So these are not meant to be fully comprehensive examples of explaining a whole situation, but it's just a different way of looking at things. So for example, the top example here, we've got current food prices are driven by supply problems as a result of COVID and the war in Ukraine, whereas a system explanation is investigating the connections between everything. Current food prices are driven by a fragile food system that has reduced the number of core food staples to a very small number that are easily grown as high yield monocultures in large industrial farms. So it's with looking at a system, it's so complex, and there are so many different ways that you can look at it. So it's really important to start from the core and work out, whereas a lot of the thinking that we see in our systems and society start from an issue or a problem, and then try and find the things that we can do to fix that one thing, without really addressing the core and all the other connections that are feeding into that issue, that are not just here, but they're here and they're here and they're here and they're here. So while it sounds kind of obvious, it's actually doing the mahi of it that it's a brain stretcher. That's what I found, at least. So some of the principles that I found really helpful were looking at the 6 conditions of systems change. Now we've got, as you can see, we've got an inverted pyramid, and the reason for that is that these top parts here, the policies, practices, and the resource flow, this is what's called structural change, and these are the areas that tend to be focused on the most anytime there is a restructure or a reform, or someone wants to come along and make changes to the patterns that we're seeing. However, they don't work sustainably unless you're actually addressing the deeper layers as well. So those relationships and connections and the power dynamics, and that is talking about, again, getting to where people are attaching meaning. So all of that, relationships, connections, power dynamics, it requires a level of self-reflection, unconscious bias, questioning your biases, questioning the way that you're thinking and operating, and asking whether this is really for the greater good of the purpose of the system that you're working in, and is it serving your own personal kaupapa as well. And when those things all align, then we get to the bottom here, the mental models. The mental models are our deep-seated beliefs, our values, what sits at the core of why we choose to do the things that we do. And this is the part that creates transformational change. So the transformative change, if that's what we really truly after, then we need to actually start down here and be asking those questions. And also we need to be moving in between the next layer up, looking, always evaluating the power dynamics and seeing where they can or can't move, what can shift, what can't. And then also making sure that we've got that whanaungatanga, those strong relationships and connections, because if we don't have that, then we'll be trying to change hearts and minds of ourselves, and that's cool, but not necessarily reaching that out and having the impact that we might be aiming for with our kaupapa or with our purpose. So it's absolutely transformative change. I'm going to say it's the hardest. Because there are so many connections and change that's needed internally as well as externally. So if we have a look to the left here, the leverage arrow which goes down, increasing leverage, there's a whole separate set of models that go along with this that break down aspects of a system that we should really be moving down towards those mental models and heart and mind changes if we're going to really create change that's going to last and be meaningful and have buy-in from everyone involved. So honestly, when I saw this, we got this diagram on like the second to last day of the course, and I was like, I wish you'd showed me that before, because now it's all starting to make sense. But I can buzz out over this stuff for a while because I find it so fascinating and interesting. So getting to the core, this is really the crux of it. And this is it's really a summary of looking at a system and how we can implement change. So again, we can see the top of the iceberg. Those are the events that happen. And normally we will, in a system, react to those events. And this is when it's, in a sense, it's easier to react to those events because we're used to dealing with urgency and immediacy. But actually, if we get to the core of whatever the issue is, then those events are going to change over time. So we can see that the next layer down is the patterns, and we can see through history, that's throughout systems, throughout everything, that there are always patterns emerging. It's one of the universal laws. It always happens. And as wise human beings that we can be, we can look at those patterns and understand what events will come out of it because it keeps repeating. So we can prepare and be ready to respond when we're working at this level of identifying patterns. However, when we're talking about real change, then we need to look at the structure of the system, the mental models, so those values, and also our core beliefs, And that's where we need to look at the design of the system that we have, because if we change all this here or make, not change the whole thing, but if we make real meaningful changes here, then we are going to see a change in the patterns, and then we will see a change in the events, which is what we're aiming for when we're instigating change. So the things to remember here are that mental models and values drive the design of the structure. The structure drives the behavior, and then the patterns and events of what we are seeing result from the change. So I've put together 4 different phases that we can look at when engaging with our whānau or engaging with stakeholders when there is when we're in a space to facilitate change. So these are called key practices in system change. Now you'll see there are interconnecting arrows, but in reality, when you are in this type of engagement, the arrows are going to be going all over the place, back and forward, and that's good because it's similar to the PDSA cycle, where we want to keep evaluating our work and make sure that we're still on track, and if not, course correct. So for this example, I'll just quickly mention these points, but also happy to kōrero afterwards about them too. So phase 1 is, for example, if you're working with a community, understanding the people and the place that they're in. So what do they already have rather than what do they need? And that's looking at what's strong and what's versus what's wrong. That's something that Jazz said the other day. I was like, oh my gosh, I love that. I'm going to stick with that. Mapping the system. So understanding what the system's actually doing. That in itself is a big task. Establishing the purpose and the boundaries, identifying and engaging with key actors, and understanding the needs and the assets of the people in the place that you're working with. Phase 2, finding your leverage points for making change. So again, identifying root causes, not just symptoms, but what's actually at the heart of those symptoms, because that will be impacting lots of symptoms rather than going around putting a band-aid on different things, trying to get to the core. So identifying those root causes, understand what can be controlled and influenced, identify the conditions that drive the current performance. What are the conditions that make the system produce these same events, drive these same patterns, and establish processes for ongoing learning. So again, ongoing learning can be sharing what your whānau has shared with you back to them, making sure that's what I heard. Is that right? Does that sound right? Do we need to change anything? And then establishing how are we going to go, how are we going to share this moving forward? So making sure there's that reciprocity always. Phase 3, to clarify and agree the objectives of the actions that you're planning to take with that whānau or community wants to take. Working closely with others, building networks and momentum. This is a key because it's all about the connections, not necessarily about the actions. The connections get the actions to happen. Identify and support local resources. So that's always, and build local leaders. So who is already there? There are some amazing examples around the motu of people who are already in their local space, and it's just a matter of speaking with them, understanding what resources they need, and being able to grow that capacity, because that's what we want. Then phase 4, learning and adapting. We implement processes for ongoing learning, again, encourage generation of ideas, experimentation and problem solving. So this is really important too, because this is encouraging newness and innovation. And it might not be that there needs to be a whole lot of new initiatives that are designed in a certain place, but it very well is likely that they need to be tweaked or thought of in a different way, or maybe the script needs to be flipped So it's coming from a whānau perspective rather than a healthcare perspective. And then we've got adapt, little and often. So there can be temptation in change-making processes where change needs to be completely overhauled and we need to start from scratch, scrap it, start again. And I'm not saying that that's not right in some circumstances, but in circumstances with communities and whānau, adapting little and often is it's the way that's going to bring more people on board. A lot of people, as you all probably know, have a bit of a phobia around change or struggle with the idea of change or haven't been included in the change. They've just been told they're going to change. And so these micro changes or adaptations are going to have better effects overall for sustainability. And I notice I've just got a few minutes left, so I'll just wrap it up. Excuse me. I'm just going to have a bit of a cup of tea because I'm going to cough. Right. So I was thinking about this and how this works, like the key highlights that I can give for how this works in my mahi and maybe your mahi as well. One of the biggest things is focus on the processes rather than the outcomes. So in a lot of our mahi, it can be very outcome driven. And actually, when we're looking at it from a whānau and a community perspective, it's not necessarily the outcomes, it's those processes along the way that make the changes. It's like making those little adaptations, and it's yeah, that's how we get more meaning, is by actually moving together slower towards a place rather than trying to get as many people as we can to this one outcome over here, because it's not going to have the far-reaching implications of moving together. So 3 key points here that I think we can look at are foster connections across people and groups across systems. So it's not just about focusing on this one group of people here and this group of people here. We have to cut across the sectors and bring people from different groups together so that they are all sharing that information and flattening out that power dynamic as well. How we can do that is through whakawhanaungatanga, from listening and learning from others and from creating a common language. So oftentimes when we're trying to flatten a power dynamic, what can be the driver of that polarity and the power is that there are people who are very well versed at a certain language, at a certain using jargon and terminology that's not understood by everyone in the room. And so creating a common language for everyone to be able to speak up the same, speak from the heart and from the same place and have it meaningful is really important. And visual tools are a really great way of being able to do this. So I look forward to seeing all the digital innovations that are going to spark from all your mahi and from all of the place-based planning that's going to happen. That potentially there's such a great opportunity there. Understanding the context of where you are. So looking at the unique local ways of doing things. What forums already exist? What groups, what networks do they already have? What connections are already strong? And or even what connections are not strong but could be strengthened? And what processes, systems and structures are already in place for that community or for that organisation? And finally, reconfigure the control. So when someone is coming in from a neutral space, then there is the ability to support decision making by controlling how and what decisions are made. And what I mean there is oftentimes decisions are made by the same groups of people or the same organizations because there isn't that that flattening of the power dynamic that we're looking at in the above points. So creating that common language, and then a way that we can configure that control is by setting boundaries on the kaupapa or the kōrero, controlling the agenda and guiding the conversation. So determining what's in, what's out, what's acceptable and what's relevant. And everyone's on the same kaupapa and everyone has the same power in the room. And that way we're able to actually steer those conversations to where the group has agreed that they want them to go. And my reflections on this are that so many parts of Te Ao Māori, I mean, Te Ao Māori is essentially a universal system that encompasses the whole cosmos and beyond. So to me, it's the ultimate in what a system is. And I know a lot of cultures have this as well. But looking at this from my perspective, I was seeing very clear examples of whakapapa, understanding the processes that have happened before, how you got to here, the relationships that have already been developed, how the connections are made, and what's happened in the past to where you are now. The kawa and the tikanga of, the processes, and also the being really clear about your boundaries and about how things are run so that everybody's on point and on track and not diverging off to taking the kōrero in places that it's not relevant for in that space. Manaakitanga and whanaungatanga are huge. So that's all about keeping those connections strong, fostering those relationships. It's, manaakitanga isn't just catching up with people once and giving them a cup of tea, like it's ongoing. And that whanaungatanga is ongoing as well. Pūrākau. So I think from a Te Ao Māori perspective, and probably a lot of other cultural perspectives as well, storytelling and having that connection into the origin of things is a really beautiful, unbiased way of people being able to connect to something bigger and see themselves in that story in a way that might influence them to change the way they might think of something or reevaluate something. And it's no matter where a story is from, it's always interesting. No matter what culture it is, it's always like, always a lesson to be learned in there. So pūrākau are really valuable in this space. Mātauranga is unique and it's universal. I shared some of this with some of our tuora whānau, and one of them said, actually, I had on my slides, actually, mātauranga is unique and not universal. I was thinking of it in a different way, and then she challenged and said, well, actually, mātauranga is very universal. And I was like, oh, you're so right. So yes, it is unique, and it's unique to different rohe, to different people, and it's universal in the context that we can all tap in and understand the bigger messages, even if we don't relate to necessarily the words or the kupu, or don't understand everything about it. There is actually a mauri behind mātauranga that we can tap into. It's holistic. It's irreducible wholeness. So we can't break up all the different concepts of a system and then look at them and study them in independence and think that we have understood the system. We can't do that. It's whole, it's connected. Those connections are like a web or like a matrix, and it's like our brain, our synapses. It works together. Knowledge is relational, so ideas are formed through relationships. For me, that was a real key in this wānanga. And I'm always having my mind blown by people who challenge or come up with different concepts that I never thought things through that way, and that's how the web spreads out. And nothing exists in isolation or can be understood apart from all its relationships. And I see this as relating to all tangata. No man is an island. We all need those connections, and we're all understood in the context of the people who are around us and the way that we're communicating. And finally, I'd just like to share this thought from one of our kaiako, Dr. David Rees from Synergia. Mātauranga Māori and systems thinking begin from the belief that the world is an organic whole, filled with life, connected in a myriad of ways, much of which we do not see, are not aware of, yet within which we are intimately entwined. So, yeah, mihi kia koutou finished on 11:11. Those are angel numbers for me, so that's pretty awesome tohu. Patria, do we have time for a couple of quick questions, or what are you thinking?
Yep, I think we chuck a couple of questions in there.
Okay, ka pai. Are there any questions? And if not, we can all have a cup of tea, I think.
I feel like you planned to finish on 11:11. You're like, oh, I'm just going to skip those 5 slides. It's 11:11. I've got to finish.
I never plan anything for 11:11. It just always happens. It's really weird. Anyway, it's not weird. It's cool.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions? There's so much content that we've just run through that sometimes it can kind of be like, maybe I'll have questions in like half an hour once it's sort of absorbed in, but super interesting. Oh, Lovey, go for it.
Oh, actually,
Kia ora, Lovey.
Kia ora, it's actually unrelated to all of this. I mean, I'm always so intrigued with you, E Hoa. And I think about when you did that waiata and got us really grounded at the conference. And actually, every time I look at you now, I keep thinking, and I'm singing it to myself. And so I was thinking, oh, I hope Jontel sings that waiata for us and teaches that. Maybe that's for another time. But I mean, it just goes to your character of your wairoa that you bring along to each and every session, Jontel, and so just really to mihi to you this morning. So kia ora.
Oh, ngā mihi, Lovey. That is lovely. And I'm happy to come on. I think maybe not this session, but or in any session, if you just want me to pop in for 15 minutes, we can do the waiata. All good, anytime.
Perfect. I'm going to remember you said that.
I was just going to say, Patria and I have literally booked you in.
Oh, yeah. I was like, mental
it just
note,
popped up in my
discuss
calendar.
this.
Cool. I'm also
We're
happy
very
to
efficient.
very efficient, especially when there's a speaker involved. I'm happy to answer any questions, or I shouldn't even say answer questions because I'm not an expert on any of this, but happy to kōrero with anyone who has any questions about any of that. I've got a ton of resources as well, so happy to share. Yeah, totally. So, ngā mihi kia koutou.
Amazing. Thank you, Jontel. It's great to hear. Now we will just have a quick 10-minute break just for wharapaku, get a cup of tea, and then we'll come back on with gums, which will be great to finish us off for today's session. All right. See you all in, sort of 8 to 10 minutes will be great. Kia ora. Did everybody get a cup of tea?
Yep.
Oh, I was too
So-
nervous to move from my chair.
You're like, oh, I might lose the meeting.
I don't know. I saw it on my chair, like the angle is right, the light is right. I was like, no, we're not moving.
I can't see you. Can everybody else see you?
What?
You can
Is
see
it-
yourself, Patria, what are you saying? Sorry?
No, I'm just saying, can you see Gums?
Mhm.
Ah,
Yeah. Is it just me? Can I just not see?
I'm sure I just saw him down the corridor.
Oh, yeah, apparently it's just my screen.
You got to update your software, man. We'll shout you guys next update at Collaborative.
oh, cool, thank you.
Yeah, we're recording this, so we just got that.
Yep, yep.
We'll use those.
Oh, yeah, there you go. I got you. I pinned you, so you were the biggest thing on my screen, and then you just magically popped up. Excellent. Now you don't have a presentation. We're just going to listen to your dulcet tones.
Oh, I
inform us
feel
of the wonderful
underprepared now.
things.
I've just seen all these presentations. Like, so I quickly just did one now. So yes, we are
Did you actually?
professionally ready. Yeah, no, a little bit.
Excellent. Well, I feel like quite a few people are back. Oh yeah, Lovey is not had to pop out. Perfect. Well, I think we should get going. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you're all, suitably cup of tea'd up, ready to listen to Gums. I'll pass over to you.
Thanks, Patria. First, I just want to thank Renee and Patria for giving me no choice to do this. My rights were taken away, so now we're here. Pretty much.
What are you gonna do?
Exactly. Talofa love everybody. Mamor fata alofa te vinga whaftai matu mafuta nene yaso mani manuia. Listen, I'll keep this very brief. And my name is Gums. I have two roles here at the Whanganui Regional Health Network. My first role is my passion. I'm a registered nurse up at our after hours GP, and I currently run one of the respiratory clinic, and that ends next week. And my second hat is my Pasifika hat. It's called a Community Connector through MSD. And that gets me out and about in the community trying to find everybody and anybody really to see who needs a hand with anything and everything. So those are my two main hats. What I was invited for was our event that's happening next weekend on the 20th of October. But if I just give you the history of just last year I was appointed what's now called the MSD, Pasifika Community Connector. And what that meant was I had to go out into the community, find the people who needs help, link them with services. You're literally connecting the community with the services they need. When I went around last year, I was asking each services, like, man, what do you guys do? What do you guys do? And then it got me thinking, it's like, if I don't know what you do, what the hell do we think the community knows if we don't know what we do each other? But my approach to these services were very specific to Pasifika workers. So last year in September, there was an event that we called Pasifika for Pasifika. And it was very, very simple. I invited about 30 services. All these services had a Pasifika face behind those services, or they worked in these places. So the goal was simple. It was come to our talk. You've got 2 minutes just to introduce yourself to the community, say who you are, what do you do, and how do you help the community, or how do you help the Pasifika community to be for our focus. And so that went on, and it was great. We catered for about 250 people, and on the day, over 500 people rocked up from around the motu, and I'm looking at the people, and I'm looking at our caterer, and then I'm looking at the people, and I'm trying to say, do we have enough pig on the please tell me what a second pig on the spit at the back, just because it was a lot. There was a lot of people. The theme for last year what we put on our brochures is it's in Samoan, and it says ele sua se lolo I se popo e tasi, which means you cannot get enough coconut fat from one coconut. Now, if you were to put that in, in our workplace, it means you cannot just go to one service for help. You really need a lot of services just to get a family on track, or just get them all to help. So that what it means. You can't do it yourself. You got to come together. Now, fast forward to this year, in 2 weeks' time, we were thinking, all right, we got to do something else. We got to keep this ball rolling. So all our services last year, about 30 of them who spoke, they said, look, this year we'd like to meet the community now, because last year was just the introduction. So that's where this expo came on. Now, I was hoping only about 30 services were going to rock up at the expo. I just finished counting. We got almost 60 people putting up a store at our local stadium. And I'm just going to share something quickly. This is the first time I've ever shared something. So this is our first flyer. Somewhere. Here. So the Pasifika for Pasifika 3. Now the slogan was pretty basic. Come and get to know your support services throughout our community with Pasifika entertainment and food. I grew up in South Auckland. My whole life, I grew up in South Auckland, and everything was Pasifika by default. Everywhere you went to school, just PIs. You went to the flea market, just PIs. And then I moved to Melbourne, and then there was a culture shock for me. You know, a young Samoan fella just gone to Melbourne. He's 17 years old, and he's venturing out, trying to see what's out there. And then I left Melbourne, and this is when the calling for the nursing part came. So I've moved to Whanganui now, 7 years later. I moved to Whanganui 7 years ago. And now it's another culture shock, because you've just moved from a Pacific community in the thousands and thousands. Then you've gone to Melbourne, and I'm in a community with no Pasifika. And then you've moved to a smaller town with a smaller population. So our recent study, people enrolled in our region, I just counted it now, we're looking at about 61,000 people who have enrolled at a GP. Of that 61,000, 1,700 are Pasifika. So here's me thinking, I gotta find everybody. I gotta introduce the 1,700 to all these services that we have around our region. So that's pretty much our aim. Now that's our flyer, by the way. And I'd like to give a big ups to our person who designed it. She's just down the hallway. Funny enough. Our entertainment for the day. Open the doors at 11 o'clock, and we just want to shut it at 2. We want to do it short, sharp, but effective. So all these performances, you guys can see that, right? Sweet. All these performances are from everywhere. We just put out the call and say, like, if anybody wants to have a performance, or if you want to come show some talent, go for gold. So Hula Beats is a Whanganui. So we've got an input from Hore Whenua, which is great. It's our neighbors. It's about an hour 10 or something down the road. And then we've got our other neighbors on the other side from Palmerston North, and they say, look, we remember when we started, we'll come out and help. And this is great, because the next thing I said was, good, because we got no money to fund you. We got no extra funds to koha for now. Oops, and the last thing I just wanted to share, it was, we talked about these 60-ish stores that wanted to come and play a part or have deliver their service and introduce themselves to our Pasifika community. And I'm not the most tech savvy, but we're going to give this a go. I think our system has it's just feeling the vibe from collaboratives, because now we're slow now. So last part I just wanted to share was just who's invited. So just roughly, red is our health services who all wanted to chip in and say, yeah, we'll put up a store for sure. We've got the gold from training and employment, and there's a lot there. Social services want to come on board. You're looking at mental health to the Grace Foundation, who supports our men who come out of prison and just want to get help for the long term. Age Concern is one of my favorites. I'm blessed to be on the board for them. You got mental health and youth support in that blue. Just haven't put these guys yet in a category just yet. And then we got two of my favorites, two of my sort of favorites, the Whanganui Foundation House and the Department of Internal Affairs came up to me and said, look, we know that Pasifika love making groups and love making these cultural groups, you know, to share dance and to share food and wisdom and knowledge. And they said, we're going to be there so that the community, if they want funding, if they want help with funding, they can come and approach us. The defense, law, and the police, all of them jumped on board. And I'm like, oh, we're going to need a bigger venue now. And last but not least, it's just as important, our education section. And then outside, we've got the dental bus there. We've got the sports section there. We've got two barbers who came on board to say, yeah, we'll cut here for free for our elderly. And we've got one of our Samoan boys over here, says Lani Taito Boxing. He's just opened up a boxing box fit for females only, and he's going to come and showcase that. Renee hooked us up with the Whanganui Library. So we're I'm very fortunate to be in a position here at the Regional Health Network to be able to do this. So it was a crazy and it was a stupid idea in the beginning last year. It's like, yeah, let's bring everybody together. And you're like, nah, let's not. Who are we kidding? We've got no money. But if the intentions are well, then it will all be provided. So that's the Pasifika in a nutshell. I just made a quick note with Donna, who said something about the debts. I want to say trigger. The thing I look for that really resonates when I'm practicing in a clinic is that if I get a family then we're doing a consultation, I just happen to look at their debt, because it does say up top, and then that gives me a prompt to say, hey, look, is there anything else I can help you with? Anything outside this clinic? I've got this other hat on. There's some funds there. That's how I've helped. Just like you don't really promote it, say there's a guy over there who pays all your debt. But seeing the high debt in patients' consults is kind of a prompt for me to step in and just offer something else. Because the last thing I want to do is not see these kids again just because they can't afford the $30-40, or if it's free, then great. But there's always going to be that case where, since the kids, you're seeing the kids, can you see me as well? And then it starts from there. So I just wanted to add that in for what's out there. Apart from that, I hope none of you have questions, because if you do, don't ask me.
I got questions.
Oh,
I got questions too.
No, Mahi Gums, that was awesome. I'm just blown away with how many providers that you've got coming, and I got a couple of questions. How do you get that level of engagement? Is it because of the Pasifika community as a cultural kind of exercise is quite well engaged? Or also, I mean, obviously there's a lot to do with you and your relationships that also make that happen. So that's one part of the question. How do you get such high engagement? And then also, how many people have you got on your team supporting you for that? Because that's huge.
I'll answer the first one. The first one, how did I round everybody up? It took me my whole nursing schooling. So when I was studying as a nurse, it took me up to 4 years. I know it's in 3, some of us need a break, so I took 4 years. But in that 3 to 4 years of nursing school, that's when I just went and planted seeds everywhere. And just to be fair, in Whanganui, it's not every day you got a Samoan male going to do his nursing. And so when you do get, when I was at nursing, then you started getting call outs for like, can you come into ED? Can you come and translate for this family? Can you come into this GP? Can you come and, what's it called? Yeah, translate for that family. Then the courts heard. So then now the justice system, like, can you come and interpret for this case? And then that's when my fees went up. That's it. It was just planting seeds in my early days of being here, because I just knew in the long term what I wanted to do. I wanted to help if I can help. And then as for the workforce team, last year it was a big learning curve last year. Last year we had 6 in our team. And so when the event was happening last year, we looked all over and it was like, we need help next year, because one, we didn't have a parking warden. We didn't even think of that. We didn't even have a first aid person. And because this little girl came up to me, it's like, hey, that lady said come up to you for a plaster. And I looked at her, it's like, oh, it's bleeding, but not that much. It's fine. Just go back to your mum and tell her to rip a lava and just wrap it around your finger. And so it's these little things that we learned a lot from last year. So now this year I put the call out, and we've got about 33, 34 in the team just to try and help get this event up and running. I hope that answers your question.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I just think that, yeah, your personality, but then also the mana that you hold in the community, it speaks a lot to that you're able to bring this together with your team also. So I hope it's an amazing event.
Thank you. Thank you. We put on a face between 9 and 5, and we go home and we take it off.
Sarah's just got a question there.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, because I'm in Auckland and, you know, we do a lot of these sort of big events, but have you linked any health screening in? You know, you've got a captivated audience. Have you got somebody that can do your HPV self-testing, CVD-RAs? I mean, you know, we sometimes have some really good outcomes when we link in at like Pasifika events for screening. I know it's complicated, but...
No, that was our primary reason for this expo. Before we thought of the expo, exactly, I should have just kept it as a whole. Before the expo, it was supposed to be just an immunization screening event, and then I was like, man, what a waste of time, what a waste of money, what a waste of everything. If we're just gonna we might as well, if we want to do something for Pacific, we might as well invite everybody. But the way our layout is done at this stadium that for our venue is that when you walk in, we've got 2 separate courtrooms. The first basketball courtroom is purely health screening vaccination. So that means everybody who walks in has no choice but to see the vaccination, the before school checks, the screening, everything. And then you go on to the other side, and that's when you get your food and whatnot. One of the biggest plans for the venue was we put the food last. It's like, if you want to get the food, you got to see everybody before you get your food. So yes, they are on board, and we have over here the Regional Health Network. We've got a great team, and that's their bread and butter: screenings, immunizations, you know, just all that.
Amazing. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Food last, because even myself just going to anything, I was like, okay, so where's the food? But if you have to go through, you look at the stalls, you know, you get your things. Got Liana's got a question there.
Tilo for Lava Gums. Thanks so much for joining us. I wanted to ask a question. I'm in Central Otago, down in the deep south, and we don't have a huge Pasifika community here, but it is growing. And are there other people like you that work as community connectors in different parts of the country?
Oh, this is a touching topic there, Liana, but I'll share with you anyway. The connector role was originally, it just ended 17 days ago. So at the end of September, the MSD Community Connector contract in Whanganui alone, we had about, give or take, about 20 contracts. And that was for the last 2-3 years. I've only been in it in a year. And then what happened was the budget went, it just altered, and it went each their way. And what was left over is that all those 20 contracts here in Whanganui ended, except one, except my one. So that's why it's a touchy topic, because every other connector I see, they're like, oh, you got the job. It's like, come on, you got to be like that. So there are other connectors around the whole country. Yes, they are. Are there specific Pasifika ones? I don't know. All I know is that from here till almost Palmy, I know I'm one of the only ones.
Right, thank you. Yeah, we have a lot of events here. We've got a really growing Samoan, Tongan and Vanuatu population here, and it's just such a small area though. So yeah, they sort of all do it through the community groups, not an organised person as such. Yeah.
Sorry, just one last thing. My soft spot for being out here in Whanganui was our visa workers. Now it's hot topic up here in the seasonal workers. So you've one of the other aims of having these expos was one of my biggest investments was bringing somebody from Wellington. She's a licensed immigration advisor, and it's a massive kudos to Renee who set this up. So we wanted to bring somebody over from immigration or an advisor so that our visa workers can come here and go, look, what am I eligible for? Because right now I'm going to like our after hours GP and paying $166 a visit. I was like, is that really my cost? So it's just laying them out to our visa workers or to our seasonal workers saying, look, your contract says A, B, and C. You're allowed A, B, C. You're eligible for A, B, C. Because right now I can tell you that all our Samoan, the Samoan cookies and Fijians, that's our main seasonal workers here in Whanganui, half an hour in Martin. You see a contract in the islands, you go like, sweet, I want to go to New Zealand and go make some money. Then when you land here, and I butt heads with our meatworks, because it's like, okay, meatworks, you got the visa workers, you've got your workers, you're gonna bring them over. Cool, thank you for giving the job. But what do you do from there? Do you teach them about how do you apply for the GP service? Do you teach them how does MSD work? Do you teach them anything that's basic living here in New Zealand? Or do you just say, welcome to New Zealand, here's your paycheck, off you go? So, now this has just changed into a rant now.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's topical. We have 260 knee vans boys from Manawatu here, seasonal workers, and it's a big topic here for us too. So super interesting. Thank you.
And that was actually going to be my question, was could you talk a little bit more about kind of the visa side of things? Because when we spoke before, before we coerced you into speaking today, you were like, everybody comes over and they just don't know. So and then that kind of sort of follows on from a little bit of what Donna was saying is, making sure that your patients are actually aware of what is available. And that's the same thing as making sure that Pacific community that are coming in, like, are aware of what they can get and don't have to go and pay that extra money when they can actually go to the doctor as part of their visa conditions. So I think that's really great. So how many people do you expect to come? Is it next weekend? Yeah, the 28th. That
was the only question the caterer said. So how many people? And she said, because last year you had 500 people. I was like, probably 1,000. It's like, what? I was like, just think of the same 500 people eating twice. That's it. It's the same thing. So I don't know. I hope to have, I don't know, we'll cater for just over 500, but we'll see. But 100 of those is just our store holders.
Yeah.
And so that's why we asked the kids, we asked the high school for their performance. We asked the youth groups because they want to bring in the parents and all the families come watch. It's a stepping stone. It's a foundation. My goal is to, if I was ever to leave this position, is to leave it with someone with the foundation there. Just as the Pasifika, our elders did many years ago. I'm just trying to keep that flame lit.
I think also with the amount of providers that you have there, that's amazing whanaungatanga for them as well, because how often do they get to have a space to talk with each other about what they're providing, what services are updated, who's who in the zoo. So it's just a big win across the whole board, I reckon.
Yeah, well, it's a work in progress, and I'm not looking forward to what stupid idea we have next year. But
that was my question. I was like, so what do you think you're going to do after this?
just a cup of tea.
You're like world domination, just the usual.
I'm only a speck of what the team is. It just takes a stupid idea.
No, I think it sounds amazing. Like, it's just so great to hear, we sort of started from last year with those connections, and it's just built into this probably going to be massive expo. Yeah, and it's just so great to see that support for the community, everybody coming together. Like, it's, I actually was looking at my diary. I was like, could I just pop down for this? Is that in my travel plans?
Hey, man,
amazing.
Yeah, if you're just down the road, I think your safe travel distance is about 3 hours. So if you're within 3 hours driving distance, then Whanganui is a great place.
Excellent. I'll have to do some Google mapping.
Finals is on that day. Terrible date. But
now, does anybody else have just any final questions?
I was just about to thank you and then go away. Come on.
All right, you can thank and go away.
No, thank you for everyone. Thank you for your time and just for the invitation. And I look forward to more of these talks, these talanoas. And it's just thank you for your time.
Amazing, thank you. It's been really informative. Thank you to all of our speakers today and all the questions we've had. This has been like a really great session, really interactive. So we are just sort of coming up to close. So unless anybody had any sort of last statements, questions, thoughts, we could move on to a closing karakia. Now, does anybody have a lovely one they want to volunteer? I've got a nice little collab one here ready to go. Okay. Oh, I keep losing my screen when I'm doing it. Okay. All right. So I've got ko ranganui e tu nei, ko papa tua nuku e toku nei, kia tau ti rangi marie, ki runga e tu tātou mahitahi, haumie, huie, kaikie. So thanks everybody for coming and enjoy the rest of your week. Have a good long weekend and I'll see you next time.
Ngā mihi everyone. Ka kite.
Thanks, everyone.